year was 1992. A year of fades, scrunchies, and baggy clothes with clashing colors. But in April 1992, Los Angeles experienced 5 days that would become infamous. 5 days of looting, rioting, and violence that came to be known as the LA riots. It happened in response to the acquittal of 4 police officers who had been videotaped delivering a savage beating to a black man named Rodney King. 6 months later, in November of that same year, a new band emerged on the scene, lying somewhere at the intersection between hardcore punk and rap music. Their self-titled debut album contained a lead single that was powerful and driving. The band wrote, inspired by the Rodney King verdict. The band I'm talking about, of course, is Rage Against the Machine. And the song is called Killing in the Name. In my opinion, it's the most defiant song of all time. Hey, it's Ian from Soundfly. Today, I'm talking about rage. In particular, I'm talking about a song that expresses rage and defiance in some really interesting musical ways. If you enjoyed the video while you're watching, please subscribe to our channel. This song has always been one of my favorite pump-up songs. It was only recently, when preparing for the Fight Songs episode of our Themes and Variation podcast, that I kind of realized how much interesting stuff was happening musically. Lyrically, it's a searing indictment of US policing and violence, delivered in just a few words, but with a driving, repetitive insistence. Musically, this song barely has any chords. I mean, it's got a lot of interesting harmonies, but there's not a lot that you would consider a really clear chord progression. Instead, it's mostly a series of riffs around the note D. And those riffs are kind of all over the map. This song was written in drop D on the guitar, and there are moments that feel very straightforward, like they're in D minor. But there are other moments that feel more D pentatonic or D blues, even a little D major. There's some chromatic moments, even a moment that feels almost like D Phrygian. Basically, for large portions of this song, any note is fair game as long as it comes back to D. And the song does use every single pitch in the octave. Don't worry, we checked. The whole thing starts off with a few angry stabs, and then the first thing we hear is a bass line. It's a minor ninth, jumping from a D to an E flat more than an octave above it, a pretty unusual interval. And that E flat, that's not in a D minor pentatonic or D natural minor scale. It's almost got a bit of a Phrygian or Locrian color to it. Those are 2 modes or scales that have a minor second between the first 2 notes. Basically, without getting too caught up in it, we're already starting to experience some heavy dissonance right out of the gate. At the same time, the bass is playing quarter note triplets. It's what you get if you divide the 4 beats of the measure evenly into 6 notes. It gives it a little bit of a halting and off-kilter feel. After 4 times through this riff, the guitar comes in on top and things get even more out there. The guitar notes are C sharp, D, F sharp, and G the first 3 times, and then C sharp, D, G, A flat, G the last time. Always played over the top of E flat in the bass. What is happening here? If you put those notes together on the keyboard, you get a bunch of notes from the chromatic scale. The chromatic scale is often seen as the musical equivalent of the color brown. It's what you get when you mix a bunch of colors together, or like mash your hand on the keyboard. But in this case, you've still got that emphasis on the D, especially in the bass, so it's a little more musical than that. Rhythmically, the guitar is playing a pretty straightforward 4/4 rhythm, while the bass switches from triplets to a more dotted eighth notes type thing to lock in, playing this rhythm now. There's some really interesting friction here between those 2 rhythms. The guitar is playing these 3 evenly spaced notes here over these 2 evenly spaced notes in the bass, so you've got a bit of a 3/2 thing happening. It's just a little bit mathy. And while all of this is happening, every time we get to a new section, we also get a change of tempo. In other words, everything that's happening so far is pretty disorienting and a little dystopic. There's a lot of tension going on. The next major riff is this groove, which has a totally different vibe from the chromatic stuff we've been hearing so far. It draws on something our friend Dr. Ethan Hine calls blues tonality. The idea of blues tonality is that the blues exists outside of the traditional distinction between major and minor. Instead, the blues often contains elements of both at the same time. So here we have a riff that has both an F, a minor third in D, and an F sharp, a major third in D. In fact, if you wrote out all the notes contained in this riff, you get a D, E, F, F sharp, A, B, and C. Those are basically the notes of the Dorian scale, a minor sounding mode, and the Mixolydian scale, a major sounding mode, but mashed together. Honestly, we spent a lot of time arguing about this riff as a team. Partly it's just because we're super music nerds. Nerd alert! But also, to me, this part sounds pretty major, but with kind of a bluesy thing going on over the top. I can imagine soloing in D Mixolydian and it would sound good. But to others on the team, it sounds much more like a classic D minor riff, but with a little bit of major ornamentation with that F sharp. And you know what? That's the point. The blues doesn't really bother with that distinction, and that's really cool. It's just the blues, and that's what we have here. Whether the band intended it this way or not, they're drawing on a tradition, the blues tradition, that's rich in defiance to authority, struggle, even celebration, but a defiant celebration. Claiming your humanity in the face of something that's trying to deny it. Okay, so here's what we've got so far. A dissonant interval to kick things off. Then some weird chromatic stuff and even mathy stuff to get things going. Then a bluesy riff that mixes major and minor and draws on a tradition of struggle and defiance. What else? Well, to me, the part that actually makes this song the most defiant of all time is actually the breakdown. And the first one happens here. All the music stops and there's just a simple rhythm. The bass and drums are playing call and response with the vocals. Dun dun is the call. Now you do what they told ya is the response. It starts kind of quiet, but gradually increases in intensity. Eventually, the guitar starts playing a steady 16th note rhythm that quickens the pace. Together, the lyrics and the instrumental part create this kind of boiling pot atmosphere. You get the sense that some sort of oppressive force from above is meeting some gradually rising force from below, and it just cannot continue like this forever. At the end of the breakdown, it gives way to the most straightforward groove we've encountered so far. Pure D minor pentatonic. It's a huge release, although there are bigger ones to come. Now, the second time through the breakdown, it's basically the same thing with two small differences. First, the lead singer, Zach De La Rocha, adds another lyrical layer. So he says, now you do what they told you, and then responds to himself with, now you're under control. Second, the guitar at some point starts adding this gradually rising pitch in the background. It's almost like a shepherd tone, that technique that was famously used by Hans Zimmer in the movie Dunkirk. It's a technique where you create the perception that a tone is just rising in pitch forever. It's super, super tense. And then we have the final breakdown. What can I say about the final breakdown? It might be some of my favorite 30 seconds of music of all time. The lead singer, Zach De La Rocha, starts hesitantly saying his famously defiant lines. The drums are going crazy, hitting every drum on the kit. The guitar, meanwhile, walks slowly up a D natural minor scale, one note at a time, building the tension inexorably until it reaches the octave, at which point everyone locks in on that D minor pentatonic groove. At this point, Zach is just screaming his lines in defiance. We're now firmly in D minor pentatonic and stay there until the end. To me, this moment just so perfectly encapsulates what I imagine to be the psychology of a riot. The simmering rage of the crowd gets directed at something and takes on a life of its own. And that's what this song does so well. Through its dissonances and its chromatic tensions, through its repetitive lyrics and its driving, escalating builds, The song just jars you out of your sleep and out of your comfort zone and forces you out into the street, for better or worse. As such, it's been used as an anthem of defiance ever since.
Thanks for coming out today, and here's Rage Against the Machine.
A very quick addendum to this story. This song, Killing in the Name, actually got a second life in 2009 when a group of people in the UK who were kind of sick of being force-fed sappy songs from X Factor winners decided to start a campaign to make Killing in the Name the most popular Christmas song that year. And they succeeded. Rage Against the Machine were totally surprised. Tom Morello, the guitarist, called it a wonderful dose of anarchy. The band actually donated all its earnings from that campaign to charity. But it just goes to show you, defiance can make itself known in all sorts of weird ways. So what's your favorite part of the song? Let us know in the comments. And if you enjoyed this video, please like it and subscribe to our channel. Thank you so much for watching.